"Your father can't know about this," my mother whispered when I caught her with another man. Again. For 3 years, I covered for her lies. But when she asked me to lie to my own father one more time, I opened my phone and showed her something that made her freeze. My name is Rachel, and I was 26 years old the second time I caught my mother cheating. The first time, I was 19. I'd come home early from a college weekend to grab a textbook I'd forgotten, and I found her sitting too close to a man in a parked car outside our house, her hand on his arm, laughing in a way I hadn't heard her laugh with my father in years. She saw me through the windshield. Her face went white. She got out of the car, walked me inside, sat me down at the kitchen table, and cried. Actual tears, shoulders shaking, and told me it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that she loved my father more than anything, that if he found out, it would destroy him, destroy our family, destroy the two of us most of all. I was 19. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. So I said nothing. That was 7 years ago. The second time was 3 weeks before my 27th birthday. I was driving home from a client meeting, taking a shortcut through a part of town I never had a reason to be in, when I passed a hotel, the kind with hourly parking right up front, and saw my mother's silver Lexus in the third spot from the door. I told myself it wasn't her car. There are a lot of silver Lexuses. I told myself that the whole drive home, and I almost believed it until I got a text from her 20 minutes later that said, "Running late, dinner with the girls, don't wait up for me." And I knew. I just knew. My father, Robert, is 61 years old. He has worked at the same manufacturing plant for 34 years, first on the floor, now as a shift supervisor, because someone had to pay the mortgage, and my mother's taste had never been cheap. He is not a demonstrative man. He doesn't say, "I love you," easily, but every single morning of my childhood, I watched him make my mother's coffee exactly the way she liked it. Too much cream, no sugar. Before he left for a 5 a.m. shift, because he said it was the one thing he could do for her before the day got away from them both. That night, I sat in my car outside the hotel for 40 minutes before I made myself drive away. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I went home to my apartment and I sat on my bathroom floor and I let myself feel, for the first time in 7 years, exactly how much I had been carrying. Because here's what nobody tells you about being the child who finds out. You don't just find out once. You find out every single day after that. Every time you watch your father hand your mother his paycheck. Every time she rolls her eyes about how boring he is at a family dinner. Every time she asks you, sweetly, casually, like it's nothing, to help her explain where she was. I called her the next morning. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just said, "Mom, we need to talk." In person. She met me at my apartment 2 hours later, and the second she walked through my door, before I'd said a single word, she started talking. "Whatever you think you saw," she said, "it's not what you think." That's how I knew she knew exactly what I'd seen. I need to back up because second time makes it sound like there was a clean 7-year gap where everything was fine. It wasn't. It was worse than that. After the first time, when I was 19, my mother didn't stop. She just got better at asking me to help. It started small. A few months after that first incident, she asked me to tell my father she'd been with me shopping on a Saturday afternoon, when really she'd been somewhere else. She never told me where, and I never asked, because some part of me didn't want to know. I said yes. She was my mother. She was scared and asking for my help, and I was 19 and desperate to believe the crying at the kitchen table version of her was the real one. Then it became a pattern. Over the next 3 years, the years I'm about to tell you about, the years before I found the hotel, I lied for my mother more times than I can count. I told my father she'd been at book club when she hadn't joined a book club in a decade. I confirmed she'd been helping me pack for my apartment move on a day I hadn't seen her at all. Once, when my father asked me directly, looking me right in the eye, whether I knew where she'd really been on a weekend she'd claimed was a spa trip with my sister, I lied to his face and told him yes, I'd talked to her the whole time, everything was fine. I want to be honest about something. I told myself I was protecting him. That's the lie you tell yourself when you're covering for someone. You tell yourself you're the shield, the good daughter, the one holding the family together with both hands so it doesn't fall apart. But that's not what was happening. What was happening was that my mother had made me complicit, and every lie I told for her put one more brick in a wall between me and my father. A man who had never once given either of us a reason not to trust him. The worst part wasn't even the lying itself, it was watching him. My father is not a stupid man. I think somewhere underneath the surface, he knew or suspected something was wrong for a long time. I'd catch him looking at her sometimes with this expression I can only describe as waiting. Waiting for her to tell him the truth, waiting for permission to ask the question he was afraid of the answer to. And every time I backed up one of her stories, I watched a little of that waiting light in his eyes go out, replaced by something that looked like acceptance, like he'd decided it was easier not to know. I hated myself for that. I hate myself for that still, if I'm honest. My mother, meanwhile, never once acted like what she was doing was wrong. That's the thing that took me the longest to understand. She didn't hide from herself the way I hid from myself. She'd talk to me sometimes, carefully, in code, never using the word affair, about how unfulfilled she felt, how my father had stopped trying, how she deserved to feel alive. She made it sound reasonable. She made it sound like something that had happened to her, rather than something she was actively, repeatedly choosing. And every time, at the end of those conversations, she'd say some version of the same thing. You understand, don't you, sweetheart? You won't say anything to your father. This is between us. This is between us. Like I had signed up for a partnership. Like protecting her secrets was a role I'd agreed to play instead of a burden she'd placed on a 19-year-old, and then a 22-year-old, and then a 25-year-old over and over without ever once asking if I wanted it. By the time I found the Lexus outside that hotel, I had spent 3 years, really 7 if you count everything, carrying a family's worth of secrets on my own back. And I was so tired. Back in my apartment, my mother sat across from me on the couch, twisting her wedding ring the way she always did when she was nervous, and gave me a version of the same speech from 7 years earlier, almost word for word. A mistake. A moment of weakness. She loved my father. She'd end it. Please, please don't tell him. It would kill him. It would kill our family. I let her finish. Then I asked the question I'd never had the courage to ask at 19. Mom, is this the first time since the guy in the car? Or has there been more than just these two? She didn't answer right away. And in the silence, I got my answer. It doesn't matter how many, she finally said. What matters is that I love your father, and I need you to help me protect him from something that would destroy him for no reason. It's over now. It'll stay over. All you have to do is not say anything. I want you to understand what she was actually asking. She wasn't asking me to keep a small secret. She was asking me to keep being the wall between my father and the truth about his own marriage. Indefinitely. For as long as it took, for as many times as it took. Because it was more convenient for her than facing the consequences of her own choices. And here's the part that still makes my chest tight when I think about it. 2 weeks later, she asked me again. Not about the hotel, about something new. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary was coming up. My father had been planning a trip for months. A real trip, the kind they'd never been able to afford when I was a kid. 5 days at a lake house he'd found and quietly saved for since Christmas. He was so proud of it. He showed me photos of the place on his phone with this shy, hopeful look on his face, like a teenager planning a first date. My mother called me the day before they were supposed to leave and asked me to help her get out of the last day of the trip. She needed to be back a day early, she said, for an appointment she couldn't move. She wanted me to call my father, pretend I needed her home for something urgent involving me, so she'd have a cover story that didn't involve explaining what the appointment actually was. I asked her point blank, "Is this what I think it is?" She didn't deny it. She just said, "Rachel, please, one more time. I'll never ask you again." And something in me went very, very quiet and very, very still. I thought about my father, 61 years old, saving up in secret for months to give his wife a 5-day trip to a lake house, showing me the photos with that shy, hopeful smile. I thought about 35 years of him making her coffee the exact way she liked it. I thought about 7 years of me lying to his face so my mother could keep doing this without ever having to feel the weight of it herself. And I thought, I am done being the reason he never gets to know the truth. I told my mother I needed a day to think. She took that as a yes. She left for the lake house with my father the next morning, all smiles, and I spent that day doing something I had never let myself do before. I started paying attention. I'm not proud of everything I did over the next several weeks, but I don't regret it either. I started small. I remembered the name of the hotel. I remembered roughly the man's face from the car 7 years ago. Dark hair, a gray suit, a wedding ring of his own, which at 19 I hadn't fully registered the meaning of, but at 26 absolutely did. I remembered a name my mother had mentioned once, years ago, in one of her careful, not quite confessions. A man named Daniel, who she'd said was just a friend from the gym, in a tone that even then had made something in my stomach turn over. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't need to. I did what a lot of people in my generation do without even thinking about it. I paid attention to what was already right in front of me. My mother had never once suspected that her own daughter, the one who'd covered for her for 7 years, might start looking instead of looking away. Over 3 weeks, I found more than I expected to find. Credit card statements she'd left on the kitchen counter that showed a recurring charge at a downtown parking garage 2 blocks from that same hotel, on days she'd told my father she was at yoga. A gym membership under Daniel's name, still active at the same gym she'd claimed he was just a friend from, except the two of them hadn't had matching membership dates for over 4 years, meaning whatever friendship this was had outlasted plenty of gym phases already. And on a night I drove past that hotel one more time, out of something between grief and self-punishment, I saw both cars there again. Hers, and parked 2 spots down, a car registered according to a plate lookup that took me all of 5 minutes online to a Daniel R. I didn't confront her with any of it right away. I sat on it. I let it sit heavy in my chest for almost 2 weeks, because some small, stubborn part of me kept hoping I was wrong, kept hoping there was an explanation that made all of this innocent. There wasn't. The moment that finally broke something loose in me happened on a random Tuesday. My father called me, just to talk, the way he sometimes does. He mentioned, almost in passing, that he'd been thinking about retiring in 2 years, and that he wanted to use some of his pension to finally take my mother on the honeymoon they never got to have. Italy, he said. Somewhere with good food and no schedule. The trip we always said we'd take someday. He sounded so happy talking about it, so hopeful. 35 years in, and he was still planning a future with a woman who had been lying to his face for at least 7 of those years. Probably longer. I got off the phone, and I cried harder than I had in years. Not for myself, for him. That was the night I decided I wasn't going to lie for my mother one more time. But I also decided something else. I wasn't going to hand my father this truth secondhand, filtered through my mother's version of events, softened into something she could still spin. If this truth was going to come out, it was going to come out because my mother chose to tell it herself, fully, honestly, without me doing her dirty work for her ever again. So I called her and asked her to meet me. Alone. No spin, I told her, just us. She showed up at my apartment expecting, I think, another conversation like the one after the hotel. Tears, apologies, a plea for one more pass. Instead, I sat her down at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd cried 7 years earlier, and I put my phone down in front of her, screen up. On it was a folder. Photos of her car and Daniel's car at the same hotel, weeks apart, time-stamped. The parking garage statements, a screenshot of the gym membership records, and, at the very top, a short video clip. 11 seconds, taken from my car across the street 2 nights earlier, of my mother getting into that same silver Lexus outside that same hotel with Daniel's hand resting on the small of her back as he said goodbye. I watched her face as she looked at it. I watched the practiced concern, the readiness to cry, the whole familiar performance start to rise up in her, and then falter, and then collapse when she realized this wasn't like the other times. This wasn't me walking in on something by accident and needing to be managed. This was evidence, organized, undeniable. And it was sitting in front of her in her own daughter's handwriting, so to speak, because I was the one who had gathered it. She went completely still. That's the only way I can describe it. Frozen, one hand still hovering over my phone like she wanted to swipe it away and make it not exist. "Rachel," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is this? What are you doing?" "I'm done, Mom," I said. "I'm done being the one who decides whether Dad gets to know the truth about his own life. I'm not going to lie for you anymore. Not for the lake house, not for the appointment, not for anything." "You can't show him this," she said, and her voice cracked, real fear in it now, different from the performance a moment earlier. "Rachel, please, this will end our marriage. It will end everything." "Maybe," I said, "but that's not actually my decision to make, is it? It never should have been. You made it my decision 7 years ago when you asked a 19-year-old to lie for you, and I've been making it for you every single time since. I'm handing it back." I told her she had 1 week. 1 week to tell my father herself. The whole truth. Not a version of it, not something softened enough to survive, or I would tell him myself, with everything on that phone to back it up. I told her this wasn't a punishment. It was the last thing I was ever going to do for her in this, giving her the chance to be the one who told the truth, instead of the one who got caught. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat there, staring at that 11-second video, her hand still frozen over my phone, looking, for the first time in 7 years, like a woman who understood that the story was no longer hers to control. My mother did not tell him. Not in a week, not in 10 days. On day 11, I sat down with my father myself. I want to tell you it was easier because I'd rehearsed it, because I'd had 11 days to prepare the words. It wasn't. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set my phone down on the table before I could even open the folder. He sat across from me, the same man who used to make coffee for a woman who didn't deserve 35 years of it. And I told him everything. Not just about Daniel, about the hotel 7 years ago, about every lie I'd told him since, every book club, every spa weekend, every time I'd looked him in the eye and said, yes, I talked to her, everything's fine, when it wasn't. I expected him to be angry with me. Some part of me thought I deserved that anger for the years of lying, even if it was lying I'd been pulled into rather than chosen freely. He wasn't angry with me. He cried. The first time I had ever, in 27 years, seen my father cry. And then he reached across the table and took my hand and said, "You were a kid, Rachel. You were 19 years old and she made you carry this. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry that you had to carry it at all." He filed for divorce 3 weeks later. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming matches, no scenes. My father is not a dramatic man. He simply, quietly, after 35 years, decided he deserved a life that didn't require him to wonder, in the back of his mind, whether the woman across the breakfast table was telling him the truth. My mother tried, for a while, to make this about me. Told extended family I'd betrayed her, that I'd spied on my own mother. Some of them believed her, at first. But evidence has a way of ending those conversations quickly. And most of my family, once they understood the full 7-year timeline, understood exactly whose betrayal this story was actually about. My father did take that trip to Italy eventually. 2 years later, after his retirement, exactly like he'd planned. He didn't take it alone. He met someone, a widow named Carol who volunteers at the same community garden he started going to after the divorce. A woman who, as far as I can tell, has never once given him a reason to wonder where she really was on a Tuesday afternoon. I watched him show her photos from that trip the way he used to show my mother photos of the lake house. That same shy, hopeful smile. Except this time, Nobody watching him had to know it was going to end in more lies. As for me, I stopped answering my mother's calls for a long time. We talk now, occasionally, carefully. She has never fully apologized, not really, not in the way that acknowledges what those 7 years cost me rather than just what they cost her. I don't know if she ever will. But I've made my peace with one thing, and it's the thing I'd want anyone in my position to hear. You are not required to be the wall between the people you love and the truth. Not for your mother, not for anyone. Protecting someone's secrets isn't the same thing as protecting them. And the day I stopped lying for my mother wasn't the day I lost her. It was the day I finally, after 7 years, stopped losing myself.